I tried to record this earlier today and make it more about my own bringing and my relationship with my mom, but when I start talking about my past, I start opening all these random doors, and I find myself like I'm in Breath of the Wild or something, and I like just have this endless expanse before me, and I could go anywhere, and I don't really. It's hard for me to stay on the path. So I'm gonna try to make this more focused, less on me and my past, and more on my present and the people who I'm affecting in the present through the odd relationship that I have to the idea of motherhood. And again, I'm going to try to talk as little about my own mom as I can in this video, just so I don't end up making that's going to be another video. I will make a video called just like Alt Mom at some point about the way my mom being alternative affected me. But in this video, I want to focus more on the last 5 years in particular, and also the time before that through the lens of how I look at it now after transitioning, because I've basically been transitioning for 5 years. And it's slow, obviously. I am not at my transition goal, but I've had so much shit in the way, so much other stuff in the way of that. Being trans is not the only thing I've got going on by any stretch of the imagination. But nonetheless, when I transitioned, I had an important realization about the fact that motherhood is like the most meaningful idea to me because of my close relationship with my mom being the only person I really took influence from for most of my childhood. I have always ideated motherhood, seen it as like this noble thing, this great thing, this sort of ideal, and myself as somebody who would like to be able to be nurturing and motherly towards other people. Now, I knew that about myself from a fairly young age, but I never learned how to interact in like a nurturing, loving kind of way to other people, in particular because of the ways that people tended to react to me. I gradually realized that like a lot of my behavior is informed by my mom, and while she is incredibly loving and caring towards me, that was the consequence of me being her child and like the one person she could pour all of that goodness into. But you know, I did not ever figure out how to be the way she was towards me as a child, towards other people, until more recently, until as an adult and post transition, where I learned how to kind of just pour my love openly into something I care about in a way that I just didn't feel capable of before. To an extent, it was just leaking out of me, like I used to be very celebratory of my friends and stuff like that, but only really when I talk about them, not as much to their faces or like in showing them, a good time, I guess. I feel like I've always been kind of needy, like I've always been the person who needed to be catered to more. And so it was never within my ability to be the nurturing one, because I am too busy being nurtured. I am baby, so how can I be mother if I'm too busy being baby? And the older I get, the easier it is to step into that more parental role. And in particular, when I became Brony famous, it it kind of hit me quickly because I was only like 22 at the time, but a lot of my audience was still teenagers and were really looking up to me as like a person to take advice from. And that quickly worried me because I was like, well, I am fucking not even close to like an adult, like a serious adult living a serious life. But at the same time, a lot of my values are like things that I intellectually thought through and decided against doing the thing that other people are doing that would be considered normal. And there are certain things I feel like I didn't need to be that edgy about, but like there's other stuff that like I still feel the same way. I'm in my 30s now and I still haven't been like brought to the side of society in that sense of I haven't like lost the ideals I came in with. If anything, I've gotten closer to the original ideals that I had before I started making content. So I've kind of had one foot in and one foot out of embracing like the mentor role that I have in people's lives, in particular because I really struggle with people who don't listen or who doubt me, you know? And particularly if you're somebody who's like looking up to me, but also casting aspersions on the things I do. Like, it's not that I don't think you could recognize flaws in somebody who you look up to. Obviously, you can. But like, it's the way that people will turn on you, where they'll be like, "Oh, well, you now are no longer the," like they treat you like you're not the same person when you start making a bad decision, as opposed to thinking that you could easily be reasoned with, or perhaps that your reasoning does make sense if you were to hear it out. There's a way that people have of kind of assuming that you must just have lost your mind, like the second that you do something they don't understand. And so I always had this contentious relationship with my audience broadly, and in part that was because for a long time I couldn't really tell people apart. I was getting hundreds, thousands of comments, and even if you commented on like a lot of videos with pretty meaningful comments, there were other people doing that, and I couldn't always sort out who's who. I wasn't really talking to people outside of the comment section, but I was giving so much of myself into the content, and especially if you were one of the smaller group of people that was watching not only the After Dark content, but the Digibros Let's Play channel, or listening to shows like the Pub Crawl, where like I was just putting out every single story about my life that I could think of into these videos and podcasts, and basically trying to create a sense of who I am in the minds of other people that they would be able to understand and therefore hopefully accept. And there are a lot of people who I think listened to those videos when they were fairly young and kind of took them for granted at the time, that this is just like a type of person or a way that someone is. And then over time have kind of realized that there is something very unique about my content, that it's not something you can get just anywhere else. And that's because it is about me. It's content about myself, and it is an attempt to build a relationship with you as somebody who just simply had no other means. I had no recourse into how to develop relationships with people because I had no sense of placement inside the world. I moved constantly all growing up. I never figured out how to fit in one place. I never really understood what other people were thinking or why they were doing what they were doing. And I guess the whole group think I don't click in. It's hard for me to click in with what everyone else is thinking unless they explain it. And, or if we're all thinking the same thing, rarely it never happens on like a global scale or anything, obviously, but there are times where I can find a large number of other people having the same reaction I'm having to something. Like the new Clips album keeps coming into my head as something that's like, a lot of the thoughts I had about it, I've now heard other people say, which is makes me feel very human. It makes me feel very at home in the space. It makes me feel like, oh, these are people who I can trust with certain things, because we're on a wavelength about this stuff. But that's, one very specific example. And even then, not the most meaningful, because while I do really appreciate that album, especially because it's by people who are kind of from my hometown, I also know what Virginia Beach is really like, how they weren't really even originally successful there, how they made the album in Paris, and how I didn't grow up listening to Clips. So, the new Open Mike Eagle album is actually more meaningful to me on a personal level, but that'll be its own video. God, my voice sounds like shit! Anyways, for a while, I kind of was resistant to entering the role model position, where I really wanted people to find someone else to look up to. I was like, at the very least, look up to the people I look up to, And I think the people I've had the easiest time connecting with over time are people who did take that extra step to be like, I'm not just going to listen to you because you are not where you get your information from. I'm going to listen to your sources, and so then you end up actually knowing as much as I know if you're listening to the same places I'm getting my information from, you know? And so it's always been easier for me to treat people sort of as peers when I know that they're following a broader cultural thread similar to me. But I'm also starting to recognize certain people as children, and by that I mean my children. And like, it's hard to find the line. What is, in a spiritual sense, between like people who grew up with me, alongside me, you know, or were more so raised by me? But I have two younger brothers. One of them is a year and a half younger than me, and the other is 6 years younger than me. I did more raising them for the most part than my parents did. Because even though my mom was really, really active in the very early part of me and Victor's life, after Shade was born, she really got into sort of a postpartum depression. And while she was there for Shade, it was hard for her to be there for all of us. And so I ended up being, you know, me and Victor were like very latched together from the time Shade was born pretty much through high school. And Shade ended up, you know, kind of growing up a little bit apart from us, but ultimately always with our influence as the handmaid. Like everything he learned from our influence, me and Victor's. Less so from my parents, who, you know, I think became more and more absorbed into their own kind of worlds as they grew older. And the three of us formed our own kind of world apart from that, although we also each have our own little worlds that we got lost into, you know. And at this point in life, we're all kind of in our own worlds, but they intersect. Me and my brothers definitely interact more than any of us do with my parents still, you know. So there's still a lot of influence going between the three of us, but especially from me downward. And so I'm used to being influential in that kind of big sibling, like looking out for you, trying to help out, trying to put you on and give you advice and pump you up kind of way, you know? And so that was why I was Digi Bro, because I thought the best thing about me was my ability to be a bro, to be like, not just in the sense of like a brother, but like the way a bro is, you know? Like, oh, bro, thank you, bro, you know, like that kind of camaraderie feeling, brothers in arms, so to speak. I wanted to be your digital brother in arms. So Digibro was that kind of a character, and, you know, very much had like this bromance with, you know, first with my real life friends, you know, who I talked about a lot in like the Digibros podcast, and then with my fake internet friends, the PCP, who I really tried to be real friends with, and it kind of failed. But a lot of that is because eventually I realized I'm not a bro. You know, I have big sis energy like Nobue Ito from Strawberry Marshmallow, who is the character I have always identified with by far the most since I was 16 and reading her as, you know, her character 16 in the manga. Like, that was the character I went, oh, this is literally me, which is to say, the big sis, the standoffish, on her own kind of, but sticking around to take care of these kids and kind of, you know, watch over, but also like kind of in an Arrested Development where I have more fun hanging out with these kids than I do with my peers, you know, so I end up around younger people. So like, that was how I saw myself as a teen, and especially because like anytime I found myself in situations where there were like lots of, you know, like at a party or something where my parents take us to a party and there's a bunch of people's kids around, they all end up turning to me to tell them what to do. They turn to me because I am attentive, but also calm and non-instructive. Like, I'm not like gonna tell you, all right, you have to do this. I'm gonna be like, what do you want to do? Do that, you know? So like, I guess permissive is the word I would use. I'm not very good at doling out punishment or telling people what not to do. And that's where my parenting really falls apart, especially lately. And I'm going to get into that too, because I think I'm failing as a parent in ways that most people would never hold me accountable for. But for me, in terms of what I'm trying to accomplish, in terms of what I hope for in the future, I do have to account for these things. I do have to be a better internet mom if I want the results I'm going for in the long run. So let's talk about that. First, to establish a little philosophical framework, I came to the realization at some point that there is no real escapism. You can't really get away from anything, right? Like, your imagination is so dependent on you having had experiences that it's not really going somewhere else. It's just like changing the coat of paint on something that you actually did see. And, like, on so many different levels, like, you can't you can never find like a truly unique creation. You're never going to find something that is endlessly interesting. Maybe some people do, but I think there's a lot of effort that they're really putting in and maybe not acknowledging on their own part to keep it interesting, or they're just lying to themselves. But like, I really I believe that in order for you to maintain like a sense of engagement with the world, you need to be constantly looking for more information and trying to learn more and trying to be more than you were before. And I have lost the fucking train of thought I had. Right, I was going to talk about how there's no escaping Earth. There's no escaping the internet. There's no escaping people who are still alive, or even the memories of people who are gone. It all lives in you. You can avoid it, you can choose not to look at it, but it's still in there. And so I have a very avoidant personality. I basically avoided reality for the first like 25 years of my life. And I think I had been under the impression that when I stepped outside finally, life would then begin. And the reality is, life had been going the whole time, and everybody else kind of looked at me like, where have you been? Why weren't you here? People know you exist because as soon as you show up, everyone goes, wait, where had you been? Where were you this whole time? And you can answer that, oftentimes, I lived somewhere else, I was in California, whatever. I was in a room for 10 years. Like, there's story there. There's baggage to it. So, like, that was me being avoidant. And where I went to be avoidant was the internet. And not everybody does that, because there are some people who legitimately just want to be alone. And I do spend a lot of time alone. Actually, probably now more than ever. Like, I spend more time just with my thoughts, not like trying to engage with something actively. Well, maybe not more than ever. We'll say on par. It's always been that I spend a lot of time with my thoughts, and then I go online and I share those thoughts, or I interact with other people's thoughts, and I try to have some kind of, interplay. But in that time, I've had plenty of difficult relationships. Because, like myself, most of the people who go to the internet are difficult people who don't really know how to fit into society, and so it's not like they're just gonna know how to fit in with one another when they go online. But what you realize is that, again, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere else. Like, if you want to have friends and connections, you have to choose a place and try to fit in there. Like, you can either do that in a real life location, and look, there's plenty of places that exist just to onboard people into society. Lots of it exists. Certain parts of the internet are about it. My Discord's kind of about it. This channel's kind of about it. I want you to be able to feel participant in what's going on, but I also don't want you to feel complicit in what's going on. And that's that's my struggle, is how do I exist and be human and be accepted in a society that I don't broadly accept. And the truth is that spending a lot of time in society has made me realize I can accept people individually, like, even if they're partially to blame for the problems, because they're not mostly to blame for the problems. It's mostly just billionaires. It's mostly just people with power who have an unfuckable, level of power. Like, there's just nothing you can do about it. They have to change their minds or literally die. Or, like, we have to, spiritually kill them through the law, like kill their ability to exist in the capacity they exist. But like, if you don't do that, there's no hope for like the average person changing something. You know, if it's not uh, if it's not enough to disarm the people who really have the power. So I have a level of forgiveness for people for being trapped in the society they're trapped in. But again, I don't want to be complicit in being a part of that trap. I want to feel like release. I want you to interact with me and feel like, ah, there is a home for me. There is a place for me. And if you interact with me and you don't feel that way, then I, on some level, am like, you just got to find another spot. You know, like I can't change that much about myself. But on another level, I do want to change somewhat to adapt to the people who I do. Like, there are people I really, really care about who really care about me. And I know that our relationship is important to both of us. That like it will improve both of us as people that we try to make it work. And so there are certain things I can change where maybe it's like maybe my heart isn't really in being the type of person who does certain like or says certain things. And when I change it, I'll realize, oh, this is better for me, you know? But there's other things that are so deeply embedded into the way that I operate that if you can't deal with that, then it's like I don't know how to change that for you, you know? So like so I am somewhat choosy about like who can I interact with, and that my understanding of that can change, you know? And sometimes I feel really bad because there are certain people who I think could really use someone like me but not me, you know? And so I look a lot to them like what they need, but I'm not what they need. And finding what they need is gonna be really hard, you know? So I understand why it's easier to just stick with me, but it might be leading you away from yourself, or it might be leading you somewhere you can't always, like, you won't be able to follow that long, you know? Because you might not want to go where I'm trying to end up. I'm not trying to end up in a house. I'm not trying to end up with an anime collection, or I'm not trying to end up like, I'm trying to end up in a national park, you know? Like, I can have a Nintendo on me, maybe, but like, you know, maybe I'll do a vlog, maybe I'll do a live stream, I'll definitely shoot video, but like, that's where I want to be, you know? I want to be either at a convention or in a park. You know, I don't like being indoors like this. I'm trapped here. I'm trapped here by a combination of habits, executive dysfunction, of it being fucking unbelievably humid where I live all summer, and fucking also not really the safest place. I don't really have the money to step outside. I can't spend money anywhere. And worst of all, I have a crippling marijuana addiction that's fucking up my voice, fucking up my life, stolen all of my money for the last like 8 years. And I need to quit now. Like now. Like there's no more smoking after this video. This is it. I can't keep doing this shit anymore. Before I started gender transition, I never really had a question in my mind about the idea that I would one day have a kid. Like, I just thought that was the natural course of things, and like, it was something I had always wanted. So, it wasn't that I'd spent like a ton, well, no, I did spend quite an amount of time actually thinking about like, how would I raise my kid? Like, what would I say to them? How would I answer certain questions? You know, like, uh, I had been doing a lot of mental preparation for the idea, but as I grew older, I more and more realized like how actually different I am from most people. Like, never, like, I always knew I was kind of an outsider, but it just got worse, you know, like over time. And now it's continuing to get worse. Every year I feel even further away, even though I understand other people better. The more I understand people, the more I feel like, wow, I really don't have a place in this world other than with like my immediate family and with the few people that I've built trust relationships with through initially parasocial relationships, you know? plenty of which have gone sour over time. You know, plenty of times I had parasocial relationships that became relationships that became sour relationships, you know? So it's not even like I'm on my first round of uh, building trust relationships with people who I hope I will be in with for the long term, you know? But there's lots of people who have kind of entered and left my orbit over and over again over the years as they change their minds about how they feel about me as a person, and especially parasocially, you know, especially the people who I don't really know or talk to, but have been listening to me forever, maybe leaving comments for a long time. But like, my importance to you has changed over time, you know? And there are some people who feel like, I'm just like a passing interest for them, that sometimes I'm like a curiosity they can check in on. And then other people who are like, I've developed my entire identity on the basis of the way that you communicate, the way you look at the world, and the types of media you're interested in. And when it comes to those type of people, I do feel a sense of responsibility to make sure they understand from this point forward who I really am, what I'm really about, and how much they are really like me before they keep trying to follow in my footsteps. If I led you astray so far, I'm sorry, but you need to go find your way to the track, you know? Because if you keep following me, you will end up where I'm going. And if you don't want to be where I'm going, don't follow me. Don't do that. It's not a good idea. But let me tell you that, I've spent a lot of time figuring out where someone like me feels at home in this world. And the only place that really is with people who are trying to create that sensation with me. You know, people who are themselves looking for the feeling of a home and to make that a thing with me, you know? So, and home is like a very nebulous, abstract kind of idea to me, because there's not like a physical place. This is not my home. This is a house, you know? This is a place I probably won't live in for very long. Like, just knowing me and knowing the rhythm of my life, it's not convenient where we live for Bird's commute, and we would love to be closer to his work as soon as possible. You know, it's just a money thing for the most part. That money thing will change dramatically when I stop smoking weed after this video, because it's the only thing that's ever going to get me out of the situation that I've dug myself into financially and spiritually, which really deserves to be its own topic. But I'll get back to you once I've successfully quit weed. Once I started transition, a big concern of mine was like, am I still going to be able to have kids? Because at the time I was with a woman. It would have been possible for us to become pregnant anytime we wanted, but I didn't think it was the right time. I just didn't think either one of us was nearly mature enough. Still don't think I am mature enough to have raised a child. So even though I had kind of put the ball in her court and been like, look, if you really want to do it, we can. Ultimately, we were trying to put it off. And so I was considering freezing some of my sperm so that, I would be able to still have that post-transition. But I also had a lot of a lot of misgivings about, like, do I really even want to pass on my genetics? Like, I feel like I've got lots of issues that I don't necessarily want to inflict on a kid, and I don't want to, do a bad job raising a kid. So do I really want to, do I really want to go through with that? And ultimately, my partner left, and I hooked up with Bird. And I've been with Bird ever since, who is a man. So when it comes to the two of us having a kid, obviously we can't do it with our own genetics. And I would rather use his. If we were going to have a surrogate, and this is assuming that, we ever decide we're going to have kids. He does not feel ready. I do not feel ready. I still think it's a possibility that we could actually, have a kid with some ties genetically to us, or adopt a kid from a young age. But ultimately, around the time that I was starting transition, and it was really hitting me that, like, I cannot, as a woman, have a child. And, I feel empowered by this statistic, knowing that even among cis women, like 1 in 6 women can't really have kids. Like, it's actually way more commonplace of an experience as a woman to not be capable to have kids than most people realize. This is not something they talk about because it's depressing. But, I, as somebody who did want them, realized I can't have them on my own, and I probably can't afford to, go through any kind of other process that's going to deliver a child to me. Like, so my sense of responsibility tells me that bringing new life into this world is not as important as taking care of the life that's already here. That, like, it feels to me irresponsible to introduce potentially another person who needs help into a world where lots of people already need help, especially if I can't help them, you know? And I think about, like, where I'm at in my life. I think, like, I don't hate my life, but I also feel like, was this right? Like, was this the right thing for everyone involved for me to exist? And if it wasn't, how can I make it right? Like, is there still time for me to turn it into something positive? Like, and could I make it work? Like, if I had a kid, would I make my own legacy worse? Like, if I had a kid, I probably wouldn't be a YouTuber. I probably would have a regular job, and I would just be raising this kid. And maybe I'd do a good job, or maybe I'd fucking raise a serial killer, and, like, not have done any of the good my YouTube channel has done, and have done, like, an extra bad job of, like, bringing something into the world. That could have happened. How likely is it? I don't know. But my point is, rather than, fictionalizing what I think could happen if I had a kid and tried to raise it, I can literally see how I affect people who are already here. I already can find out how I'm affecting people and whether or not I'm a good parent. And I think I'm not that good, because I'm not very attentive. I'm overly self-indulged. I live too much in the garden of my mind. I'm really glad I learned that term. I learned that from one of the people who I see as vaguely my internet children / younger siblings. Rhyme, Shitty Kickflips. One of the people who, said that I was an influence on them, and then when I watched her videos, I was like, oh, oh, this feels like if I tried to tell someone, like, what I would want a video to be like, like, I like it more than my own content. Like, it's like an idealized version of what I do in my own mind. Like, it's something I could look up to and say, oh, wow, this is the next generation taking my ball and running with it. This is someone, who is young enough to have seen me at an impressionable age and then figured out how to do that better, or not even that they did it better, but that it comes more naturally because they already knew it existed. Like, everything I was doing, I had no frame of reference for it, basically. Or I had a very limited frame of reference, like, as a person making analytical content on YouTube, like, ultimately, my videos read just like my old blog posts did, but I didn't think that would be the case. I thought it had to be sequelitis with, like, animations and comedy and stuff, like, to be successful that way. And for a long time, that was true, but I helped to usher in this new era of people kind of acclimatizing to that type of content that is just about, like, being written content but voiced, so you don't have to read it. Like, I helped to normalize that in such a way that now it's mainstream, and so there's tons of people you can take influence from that I didn't have when I was coming into the game, and while I have learned more from seeing all these other people and I copy little bits and pieces of everyone's style, I'm really just kind of plugging all of that into the style I already had. And when I see what's being invented by people who took what who can take what I do for granted because they have, it's always been there, it's always informed the way that they think and the way they create. It's a lot easier for those people to then combine that with something else, that's also been with them that whole time. So, like, so I see in someone like Shitty Kickflips a sense of descendancy, not that she's like my child or anything like that, because that's strange, but like that she is a kind of cultural descendant from my, you know, uh, cultural ancestry, if you will. We share common points that go past us, like that are older than me. But the fact that I've been there since she was so young has an effect on her content that is hyper visible to me because I know what didn't exist before I was here. Like I know what is different about my content from what existed before. And there's only a few content creators who are like obviously influenced by that and taking it in a new direction. And like I should say that there are people like No Thank You who've been around for quite a while, who's always basically been like, this is After Dark vlogging. But I would consider him a contemporary. Like that's somebody who, whether or not I was a huge influence on the way he does it, he started doing it around the same time, So like there are other people, and that's also someone who's an influence on Shitty Kickflips, or Osaka. I can't remember the name of their channel. Osaka Syndrome, I think is what it's called. Like, these are people who even if they were like kind of young when they started doing content like mine, they are now 10 years into doing content kind of like mine and also influencing other people to do that type of content. So again, it is like a cultural lineage. We're all on this kind of the same thing. And like, in a lot of ways, it felt less connected before. Like when No Thank You first started making videos, I didn't think of it like, oh, this is going to be recognizable to other people as like similar enough to my content that you're going to watch both, Like it never really occurred to me that there were people who were equal parts binging both of us and taking both of those influences and combining them, And so when I see it now, it kind of gives me a better sense of who am I really contemporary with, because I can see who people grew up with other than me, or who they've continued, like someone like Patricia Taxon, where like I've never talked to that person, but we exist in such close parallel that there's tons of people who watch both of us, And it's interesting because we've never interacted. I assume that she knows about me. She might not realize that I know about her because I've never really talked about her, but ever since she realized she had DID around the same time I did, I've been like, we're really on a kind of a parallel line here. Even though, like, Gigadonk and Shitty Kickflips and Komugi are all, like, a decent amount younger than me. They're all in their mid-20s. I don't feel as much of, like, a generation gap as I expect other people my age probably would, because I grew up on the internet. And as far as I know, I was basically like one of the youngest people on the internet for the early time that I was there. I wasn't interacting with a lot of other kids my age. I didn't know any kids my age who used the internet until at least middle school, when MySpace became a thing, And then it was just MySpace. I didn't know any other kids who were reading anime forums at 11 the way that I was in 2002. So, for me, the internet is like deeply embedded in the way that I think and the way that I am, but I also am a part of it. Like, I helped to change it. I've shaped it in my image to an extent where I showed up, I didn't like the way things were online, and so I started trying to create a niche where I would fit in, And initially, I didn't find I wasn't like influential in that same sense as an anime blogger. I was influential to like a couple of people who are younger than me. Most of the blogs I was reading were older than me and were influencing me. You know, I was the kid. I was the young one. So when I talk to younger people on the internet, I completely understand where they're coming from because I was them. I was that young kid online, you know? And there's plenty of people who I feel like I'm looking in a funhouse mirror reflection of where I was at their age when I talk to them, you know? And particularly, the person who inspired this video is Isabel. And it's because Isabel is like 15 or 16 and she put out a video the other day that's like top 20 YouTubers of all time, and I'm number 1. And she says in this video that I basically raised her, was the phrasing she used. And that feels almost self-evident to me because she talks just like me, particularly at 15, before I was really good at speaking, when I was a lot more frustrated with myself and a lot more likely to, you know, kind of like actively get mad at myself while making content and stuff, and get stuck up in what I'm trying to say, and like and feel this sense of, oh, I know there's so much more that I mean to say, but I don't know why it's not turning into words, and it's just a matter of practice and never shutting the fuck up for the rest of your life. But you know, except for when it matters. But basically, like, yeah, it's obvious that Isabel has heard more of my voice than probably her own parents. And based on the stories she tells and the ways that she interacts online, I don't think her parents have much of a presence in her life. It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that someone is looking out for this person on that level. Now, it could be, obviously she's got a roof over her head and an internet connection. So I don't know. It's not a third world living situation, but I don't know what kind of privilege level we're talking about. All I know is this kid is not interacting with her parents to the extent that she's listening to my YouTube videos. And you know what? I said this in a video recently that I think I've heard Anthony Fantano's voice more than my own father's, and I still think that might be true. Their voices can kind of bleed into each other in my head, honestly. Like, I get it. I was also raised by the internet. I had a closer relationship with ghostlighting than I had with my parents. That's why my dad sent me to the Philippines to hang out with him. Because my dad was like, I don't know how to reach this kid, you know? And my dad remembered going to the Philippines as a military guy in his early 20s, where it was a big party, where he probably just had a bunch of loose sex and did a bunch of drugs and went to a bunch of parties. I did none of that. I learned literary theory with a guy in a bedroom and went to some malls with his wife and, you know, learned both of their life stories and had the entire Silmarillion explained to me, and the whole plot of Macross and Gundam. So that was how I spent, you know, my time I was 19 when I took that trip. I'd already known ghostlighting for like 2.5, 3 years by then, you know, like that's why I had the level of trust to go do that. Is I was literally, you know, closer with people, older people who I knew online than I was with my own family. And, you know, particularly in the case of ghostlighting, he's just like the best person I've ever known. Like in terms of like quality of a human being, he's just like an endless wellspring of empathy. He's always trying to take care of someone, always trying to put somebody on, always trying to come up with some kind of idea for how to make things work better on like a social engineering level. You know, like he was heavily involved in trying to get like the Pasig River cleaned, which is like the river that runs through most of Manila and is just fucking, you know, awful. So, you know, he has worked in all kinds of interesting positions in terms of like trying to make literally the world a better place. And, you know, even if my like helping me was like a very much a footnote on like that guy's life's journey, for me, it is the catalyst of becoming who I am. Like the person who I could look at and say, this is who I want to be like. This is a meaningful influence to me, is somebody who can write and speak so well and understand media so well that they can explain things to me that I feel like I should be able to understand, and give me the power to start doing that for other people. So, in the time after that, I haven't really maintained super heavy contact with Ghost Lightning because he's been doing real life shit. Like he only really uses Facebook. He's not like he ended his anime blog and he went to go be a human, raise his daughter, who's got to be older than Isabella. Oh my god, holy fuck, that's weird to realize. Yeah, like, so, but Ghost Lightning had a kid super late. Like he had a kid at like 29. You know, Isabel is still young enough to be my actual child. Like being 15, I'm 34. I could, if I had had a kid at 19, they'd be Isabella's age. I have friends who are my age with kids who are Isabella's age. So, I'm like, this kid is literally young enough to be my child. This is not a case of like younger sibling type relationship. This is not somebody who I can look at as a peer. This is somebody I have to look at as the next generation. This is I don't know if Isabel is Zoomer or Gen Alpha, but, cusper of that. Not even I'm a cusper of Zillennial. Well, I'm probably pretty firmly in the millennial camp, but because of the fact that I am the first child of the internet, I feel like I relate to Zoomers better, which is, again, why a lot of my friends are younger. But, like, again, this is not having a friend who's a bit younger than you and you relate because you both grew up with Game Grumps. This is having someone who would never have heard of Game Grumps if not for the fact that they know about me. I don't remember why Isabel knows about me. I don't know how she fell down the Trixie rabbit hole. But watching that top 20 YouTubers video, a lot of them are just YouTubers I've talked about for a long time who are either influential on me or influenced by me. Gigadonk's in the list, Shitty Kickflips is in the list, Red Letter Media is in the list, YMS is in the list. So, fucking the Needle Drop is in the list. And I'm like, the Needle Drop is actually so much older than Isabel, I'm surprised she even relates to his takes. But then again, I love Torre. He's got to be 20 years older than me. So, but I think what I like about Isabel is that she likes stuff that's much, she listens to people who are way older than her as opposed to her peers, which I think is something everybody should do. And it was something that was really missing for me in early YouTube because older people weren't fucking here. I just mentioned Torre, but we didn't get him till recently, and especially not as a known quantity on YouTube. Torre is an old media hip hop interviewer who's, probably talked to everybody I could possibly care about who existed in music, before, or even he interviews lots of comedians, all kinds of people. He's a world-class interviewer, and now he's on YouTube, and that's the kind of thing I didn't get to have when I was coming up on YouTube, but I created, because now I am 34 with a ton of experience, really trying to not only make up for all the dumb shit I said before and be corrective about it, but learn new lessons and get everybody up to speed and really take some responsibility for what I have influenced, So, to me, I am, on one hand, trying to keep people to some degree at arm's length because I don't think you should try to get too close to me because I'm heavily dissociative and I'm just not there all the time. I'm not somebody you can really rely on emotionally. When I get overwhelmed, I just disappear. So if you are trying to rely on me for like emotional support, that's not a good idea, you know. But if you're trying to rely on me for spiritual support, great idea. I'm a great spiritual mentor, you know. Like if you need help on your journey, if you need help with being who you are or accepting yourself, those are things I'm great with, you know. And those are things that my mom was great at teaching me. Those are the reason I have those values, is that my mom, you know, if nothing else, really cares about herself and her children, you know, and preserving their sort of sanctity. And so I know how to do that. I can't help you with your taxes. I cannot help you, you know, I can tell you to not make the mistakes I did. Don't get hooked on any drugs, even if it seems innocent. And that includes like caffeine, like any of it. Well, caffeine's not that bad, but like anything else, just try not to get addicted to anything. It's a waste of fucking money. All of that money you can, like, every cent you put into something that appreciates in value is better than having that money, and especially better than having spent it. So just like try to buy things that appreciate in value, and don't well, that's difficult too, because you have to actually have a good sense for what will appreciate in value, which is really difficult to have. But government I bonds and I bills, pretty safe bets. Pretty fucking, they are considered the safest bets. I wish I had known about them. I truly do. I wish that back when I said I had $6,000 and don't know what I want to own on Rotten, I really wish I could go back in time and put that whole $6,000 into government I bonds right then and there, because I'd still have that money. I haven't seen $6,000 in years. That's another thing. If you look up to me and you're trying to copy me, remember, you will end up where I am and eventually where I'm going. Consider that I'm not where I'm going yet. I'm where I am, which is a broke drug addict living in my brother's house for a rent I can barely afford. You know, realistically. Now that I'm quitting weed, I can afford rent, and maybe I'll be able to like do a little bit more fun things. Probably still not really going to have investment income. I can put some of that money into my friends. That's the main thing. Like, I really feel bad about all my friends have Patreons now, and I can't give them anything because I spend all of my money on weed. So I would really like to just redirect that flow, you know, because I feel like I'm just spiritually wasting. It's not even the money, it's the spirit that is just wasting. And I need to stop. I literally am a wasteoid if I keep up this habit. And like, I think because I'm a hyper productive person, and so it's always going to look like I'm about as productive as I am. But I know that the weed is holding me back, and it's not even that it's holding me back because it's like making me do less. It's making me less angry when I need to be angry. Like, I need the anger to come back, and I'm scared of the anger because I know it's going to push some people away. But I need the anger because a good mother protects their children, and I can't protect you all if I'm fucking high as balls. Actually, it's not even being high, it's smoking. It's if I'm too busy literally smoking, which takes forever. It takes way too fucking long to do. And it's horribly damaging. I've finally recovered my voice through sheer force of will, and you know, like, it's been longer since I had smoked last, but like, I don't want it to be like that it was earlier. Okay, that's enough for this video. Basically, I'm trying to say that I have accepted the role of internet mom because I don't think you have somewhere else to go. If you are already this deep into thinking like me, and, you know, it's easier for me the more embracing you are of it yourself. Like, the fact that Isabel said, like, literally put up her hand and said, this person basically raised me, makes it a lot easier for me to just be like, yeah, that seems like the case, you know, like, listening to you talk. So, like, even if I still can't be, like, that close to someone who's that much younger, I also see it like this person's going to be an adult one day. They're going to keep being influenced by me. I'm not going to ignore the fact that they exist and pretend that, that like if we're all YouTubers and we're all trying to do this thing, that it wouldn't be to my benefit to make this person have success now, like to let people know, hey, this is a young person who's kind of grown up with my content, who thinks like me, who wants to have the same kind of position I do. What do you like about them? What do you want to see them do? How do we help this person to actually be able to, when they turn 18, have just a job they walk out into? Imagine if we could give a high schooler a fucking career as a YouTuber in our community, like who doesn't have to worry about how they're gonna fucking live their life after getting away from their parents who clearly aren't fucking doing anything. So, I don't know. Let me know what you think about this. Is this being responsible or irresponsible? Because to me, this is what responsibility looks like. Is if I keep making content and I pretend someone like Isabel doesn't exist, like, that to me is more irresponsible because I know she's watching anyway. I could literally ban her. She's going to make a proxy. Like, you have to think about it rationally. There's nothing I can do to make people not watch my content. I just have to make the content something that is responsible for them to see. What does that mean? It means whatever I want it to mean, basically, but it definitely means I cannot be smoking anymore, because the last thing I want is for anyone to pick up this fucking habit and think it's cool. It's fine if you already have it. I'm not blaming anybody. It's not your fault. It's not my fault. But I have to do something because I can't live the life I'm trying to live and be a smoker anymore. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for listening. Here's the shout out part. All right, shouts out to the members: Night Night, Taper Clip, Gassy Hall, Duncan264, Zen Huxtable, Zerakiel, Gigadonk, Gary Always, Z Cypher, Brody, Denacori, ASE Presents, Plague on Humanity, CC, Your Stuff is Cool, Spacey Filmer, Commenter number 456, Yodiland Wizard, Oh My Guy, The Mr. Grafixable, Spectral, Mayday from Space, Kudere Kun, Sister of Scarlet, Pika Pika 2000, Petrichor VT, Baba Caduceus, Brianna W, The Rabbit, Radio Knights, Hewan, Mining God Bruce, Zink's Ideas, Yakuman, Erratic Drop, Crystalline Fos, Curbman, ZemQ, Isabel Incorporated, Max Potion TCG, and Luna Lulu. Thank you all for joining, and I'll see you again soon.